Hello, Mane K.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome back to our program. How many times have you been on this?
Once.
I thought it was twice. I know that you were before the bar exam, but we didn't question you and grill you after the bar exam. Okay, unfortunately, we missed that opportunity, but here we are in, is it March? Where are we? February? Almost March. I'll tell you what, I've been in court so often, I don't even know what day of the week it is. So we're at the tail end of February. That means that you've been an attorney for a total of
2 months.
2 months and a few days.
Yeah.
Okay. And look what you've done so far.
It's been crazy.
It has been crazy, but you know what? I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud of the fact that you've had the opportunity to be involved in so many really complicated cases. So our guest should know that Mane is a graduate of USC. We've mentioned this before in our prior program, but she's really, really good. You know, she works up cases, and I'm so tickled to have you on our team. I mean, it's really been fun so far, and I just can't wait to keep working with you. So before we get into our topic today, what plans do you have this weekend?
I'm going up to Santa Barbara tomorrow.
Ooh, what are you going to do there?
I think just walk around. I love Santa Barbara.
Me too.
Their courthouse is gorgeous.
Okay, see, now here we go again.
I know.
We got a brainiac.
Right.
Most of us go like lay on the beach, or we go to the pier. She's gonna be hanging out over the courthouse. So.
It's like a historic building. It's really pretty.
It is beautiful.
But they have a lot of cute antique shops, so it's a good place to unwind.
Yeah, I like that courthouse too. I wish that we could have a case up there someday.
Oh, can we?
Yeah, well, we'll have to work on it. Okay. So for my plans, tomorrow I am meeting with a bunch of my friends that are lawyers. We're meeting at the hills above Arcadia, and we're going to go on a hike.
Oh.
Yeah, fun. And it's no secret that I just turned 60, and guess what? I'm the youngest guy in the group, so I'm feeling pretty good right now. Even though my knees are bad, we're going to go on a hike and then have a barbecue, and we'll see if I make it back alive, on Monday. So let's talk about today's topic.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about a case. What's the name of the case?
It's Brewster versus Clevenger.
Okay, and the reason why we thought we would have this is because recently Mane came running into my office and she said, I just read this case and it's hilarious. So, some of these facts are, not even Hollywood can make these facts up. And so she read it first. I recently read it, and we thought the information in the case would be not only entertaining, but it probably would be something that a lot of our clients and viewers of this show would want. So our audience would probably like these facts. So this is mostly what we're going to call this a spousal support case?
Yeah, temporary spousal support case.
We're also going to call it, though, a domestic violence case,
yes.
right? And so I've been thinking about how are we going to tag this one, when we put this up on our Facebook and on YouTube. And I thought, this is the case that tells you not to put rats and pythons in people's backyards.
Important not to do that.
Okay, because it could have an impact on things like spousal support,
yes.
right? Okay, so why don't you set up the facts in this? So the one thing I want to say here, though, before you start talking about the facts of this case, is that both parties, the husband and the wife, are medical doctors.
Yeah, professionals, very successful in their careers.
And you know why I mentioned that is because if you look at most of the spousal support published opinions, they're about doctors. Yeah, doctors always getting hammered regarding spousal support. It's incredible. So you doctors out there, pay attention to this, okay? You don't want to be putting rats and pythons in your spouse's backyard. So anyways, why don't we set up the fact? You tell me about the beginning of this case, and really it should start with the conviction, right?
Yeah, so the wife's name is Mary Kay, which already is entertaining because of the whole Mary Kay Avon thing.
Right.
But so she had a criminal conviction, because she put pythons, and the opinion noted that they were non-poisonous, and rats in the husband's home while the husband was away on vacation somewhere.
Oh my God!
So
I didn't read that part of it. It was inside the house.
Yeah. So
okay.
or in the back. I think it was in the backyard, but they managed to make their way inside the house. It was crazy.
How disgusting.
Yeah. So she gets like a 5-count charges for like stalking and vandalism and all these things. And she never really talks about it until it's at the closing brief or the closing argument in writing, where she kind of said this, and she said, well, he wasn't hurt by it. There was no emotional distress because by the time he came home, they were gone and they never attacked him. And it was just a lot of that.
So let's set this up. She's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
She's getting divorced to her husband, who's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And I presume that this was after they were separated. She believes that he's been unfaithful, right?
Yeah.
So to retaliate, then she takes these rats and this python, I guess. It seems like they eat each other.
Yeah, I don't know why she would put both.
I'm surprised there was anything left by the time the husband came home.
Yeah, maybe like the effect, like it's so dramatic.
Right.
Or maybe she was making a statement by it, like you're acting like a python. Like,
Okay, and
I
I'm
don't-
the rat.
and I'm the rat. Or
Okay.
I don't know what she was doing.
But drops him in the yard. It doesn't really talk about the husband, because this is not about the criminal case. So we
No.
don't know about the facts. I mean, like when the husband came home, he opens the door and there's rats running around and a
Yeah.
python hanging from the chandelier or anything like that,
Yeah,
right?
it-
We don't know about that.
It says that somebody found it before the husband got home.
Oh,
like
okay.
And so her argument was like, well, he wasn't even hurt by it. Like, what's the harm in this?
Okay. Well, what we know is that she was convicted
Yes.
of what would be considered domestic violence,
Yes.
because these type of things like stalking and things like intruding into somebody's home would probably be a domestic violence type
Yeah,
of charge, right?
exactly.
Okay. So now they're in family court.
So now they're in family court. The biggest issue on this appeal is the issue of spousal support. So she's seeking for spousal support. And as we all know, if you've been convicted of domestic violence, there's a presumption against you.
But we don't all know that. So our audience probably wants to know about this. So why don't you
Right.
tell them why?
So in family court and spousal support, if you have been convicted of domestic violence within 5 years, there's a presumption against you, meaning that they feel it would be unfair to award you spousal support because you have perpetrated domestic violence, and the victim paying you spousal support would be really unfair. So you have to overcome that presumption. So the case, actually, it's very interesting. They're talking about how she can overcome this presumption.
That's the whole point of this case.
That's the whole point
Or
of the
this
case.
portion. There's some other portions of
Yeah.
the opinion, but we're going to be focusing on the main part, which is that, right?
Yeah, and so this is pretty interesting because she's coming up in the trial and saying, well, he actually committed domestic violence on me. And I don't believe that she's filed any DVR, domestic violence restraining orders, or anything of such. So the court is kind of hearing this so she could rebut that presumption, which is against her, so she could get awarded spousal support.
Okay, let me summarize all of that. Number one, we got 2 medical doctors.
Yeah.
One may be unfaithful. The other one's putting rats and pythons in the backyard. The wife gets convicted of domestic violence, and then they go into family court, and she wants spousal support,
Yeah.
but she's got to overcome the presumption you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And she tries to do that by...
She tries to do that by bringing in testimony as form of evidence of him committing domestic violence onto her, which is actually really also insane set of facts.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that because, man, I got so much to say about that. But so what we learned from this decision is that it's a presumption which could be rebutted.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of cases
No.
on this, and we'll talk about that as well. But she's in a position where she's trying to say, hey, yeah, I was convicted, but judge, you should not use this against me because he committed domestic violence against me.
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we talk about the testimony that came out and what you learned from that part of
Yeah.
it?
So all of the testimony was just her testimony in court. And she brings up 3 different incidents of domestic violence, or that she's alleging domestic violence against the husband. And they have really egregious kind of facts. Like one of them, he apparently picked her up from her shoulders and threw her out of the office. She was there to, I guess, pick up a check. And
Oh my God, that's how you read this?
he got...
I read this as she's coming into the office and he's like, hey, not here, not now. Get out.
Yeah, and that's fair, and I think that is his point. And she's saying he picked me up and he threw me.
Right.
Another one was that he pushed her finger, and she said it got dislocated, but then the evidence just said there was like minor, it was like swelling, and there was no dislocation. And then he's saying, well, she grabbed me and she wouldn't let go because they were talking about like issues about intimacy, and she just got a hold of his shirt and she wouldn't let go of his shirt. So
Right.
he tried to kind of make her let go, and that's what happened. And then the other one is where he like hurt her. Like she went into the office to again pick up the check. I think all I'm learning is like, don't startle your husband with picking up checks. Call beforehand
Well,
or something.
It's funny. You let me say this. You're reciting what she said happened,
yeah.
right? Okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
exactly. I mean,
Because he has a
he
different
has
side
a
of the story.
different,
Right.
yeah. And so they get into this argument about infidelity, and he kind of pushes her off or hurts her hip, and she has to go to the doctor. And then, according to her, he like comes to her and apologizes, and she consoles him, and all of these things have happened before the pythons. So
Oh, this is all happened. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because this was happening kind of during the time they were married and living together, right? So she's bringing up past acts of domestic violence, and she's saying, look, all this stuff right here led to what happened, and therefore, Judge, you shouldn't really impose this sanction kind of on me, for that. Now, when I looked at those incidents, the decision talks about his version and her version, right? And the judge had to make a call.
Yeah.
Right. And could we agree that everybody agreed that it involved the wife going to his workplace, those three incidents, and him basically saying, not here, not now, and then applying force to eject her from the office.
Right.
So we do have a case, several incidents here, where he's applying physical force against her.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I thought, I've had a recent case like that. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that's interesting, right? I mean, he's kind of manhandling her and saying, get out, and stuff, rather than calling the police.
Yeah.
He could have done that.
He could have done that, and I think
He could have got a restraining order.
He could have done that.
But he used his hands to push her out. Okay.
Yeah.
So what did the trial court think about all this?
So the trial court comes out well, the trial court doesn't award her spousal support and says, no, that, that doesn't, we're not going to go by your testimony. We don't really have anything. I think there's one medical report about her finger it shows the swelling, but they're saying, all right, okay, but that's all we have, and we're not really going to kind of weigh this as much, and you don't get spousal support. So she appeals it, and the appellate court, interestingly, comes out and says, well, we've had 4 cases on this, and none of them really told us what this presumption and how we can overcome it is. The evidence code has left it vague. They use Merriam-Webster to kind of document what documented evidence is, and they come to the conclusion that it needs to be in writing. They don't really define it. They said it could be in many forms. We're in the 21st century.
It could be text messages, emails,
Yeah.
voice recordings that are transcribed.
Yeah, and they kind of make a point of like, well, we don't know how this is going to play in forms of authentication during trials, but, it needs to be in writing of some form. There's many forms.
Okay, so let me summarize that part of it. The way that I read it is the Court of Appeals said, look, we're looking at the plain meaning of the statute, and if somebody's out there trying to rebut this presumption, they have to introduce evidence at the trial level that's a document, that's in writing. So your testimony alone is not going to be enough, even if the court apparently had believed the wife, right, and she just testified. That wouldn't be enough. There has to be something in writing.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty grand of a statement to make. I mean, we see a lot of those cases. Like, how do you get stuff in writing? And that's a hurdle sometimes. It can be.
Good point. In a lot of cases, the courts just say, look, I just believe her.
Yeah.
And that's enough. But in this case, it's not enough.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that I think her attorney tried to do at the appellate level was introduce this new theory that infidelity is domestic violence and the emotional trauma of getting cheated on.
What did the Court of Appeals say to that?
They said that's not domestic violence.
Did they say why?
They said it's not within the meaning of the code. It was just very we all know this isn't domestic violence.
That's a creative way of looking at it, though. I mean, we know that emotional abuse is. So what happens if you got some guy that's a philanderer and he's just constantly doing it in front of her and stuff like that? That's not emotional abuse?
I think it is.
Okay, well, you need to get on the court, man, and start writing some new laws or something. So it's funny that you honed in on that. I wanted to go back to the he said, she said, of these incidents, So, she's in there and she's refusing to leave, and the Court of Appeals stated something about who the initial aggressor was.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
I think that his argument, the husband's argument, was like, this only happened because she is refusing to leave. She came into my work office. I have patients there. Everyone's watching this. My staff is watching this. This is not the time or the place. She's refusing to leave. She's making a scene. I got to get her out. This is how I get her out. And I guess the court saw her as the initial aggressor in this and kind of said, all right, well, maybe she shouldn't have done that. He was trying to protect his practice. And
Court of Appeals said that, right? Yeah. I feel that we're moving into a new area of law that's going to be fascinating how this develops, because what we're hearing now is the court has to consider who the initial aggressor was when two parties are involved in a physical altercation.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and a lot of times, we see people fighting over cell phones.
Yeah.
Right? And they're wrestling over cell phones. I mean, I had a case where my client was looking at his cell phone. Wife took it from his hand, and then he tried to take it back, and they got into a little, that type of a thing. And guess who got arrested?
The husband.
Yeah, he did. It was like, who was the initial aggressor? Was the person that took the phone out, or were you trying to retrieve it? And what's the law say with regard to that? Now, in the law, you can retrieve property from somebody using force
if it's your own.
Okay,
right?
Number one, if your own. What else? Didn't you do
If-
research on this?
yeah.
one? Okay, what's the other one?
If it's your own, or if you're protecting somebody else's property and you could do it on their behalf, like if they were there, they would act the same way. It needs to be reasonable.
Plus the property, there has to be imminent danger that the property is going to be
Yes.
destroyed, right?
Yes.
So if somebody's just looking at it, that's usually not enough. But
Right.
we're in a court of equity with family court.
That's true.
And the family court is not determining guilt or innocence. It's looking at whether it should issue restraining orders and
Right.
stuff like that. So there we go. We've got this, who's the initial aggressor, and what are the equities in this thing? And that's where I think it's really interesting talking about this stuff here.
It's also really hard because I think when you read an opinion, or even when we're drafting something, it's easy to, in the sense, put it into writing. But then in that moment, it's like a 2-minute, maybe less than ordeal. And then it's like, who grabbed who initially said what ticked somebody off that caused the aggression. And you're trying to really pinpoint that out in writing, which is interesting and difficult. But, it's that human component. It's so complex. Like, who really was the initial aggressor?
Sometimes it's impossible for the trial court to determine, and stuff. And that's that's what's interesting about family court is we have a lesser burden by preponderance of the evidence, but the facts are worse than that when they're in a criminal case. Because, when I was a prosecutor, you're not going to take a case to trial unless you believe that you can win by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, some cop has made a decision. You look at the evidence. You go, I agree with you or I disagree. But if you agree, you're going into court with usually a loaded hand. Yeah. We come in the court and it's razor-thin evidence, but the law says that if we just do the preponderance, we could win. But a lot of times it's he said, she said. You just know how it's going to shake out.
Yeah, and this was definitely interesting to come out and say, well, it's, we're going to define it and it's going to be writing. They talk a lot about the legislative history about this code and how the legislators were afraid that when it comes to issues of spousal support, one person is going to come out and be gaming and for a strategic purpose be filing these things. And whether that's true or not, I think, having an opinion that says, no, it needs to be in writing definitely does kind of put everybody a little bit on notice of like, well, what's the hurdle that we need to cross?
Yeah, this is the first opinion that I could recall where they went into statistics about victims of domestic violence. I think I've said this a lot of times. We in family court are right at the forefront of domestic violence. We're in the trenches, and people think of like the prosecutors, criminal prosecutors are at the forefront, or people in shelters and stuff like that. We're actually there before anybody, and we actually are in touch with either the perpetrator or the victim. And it's like, our duty is to make a dent in society too with regard to this. Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, you were awesome today, as always.
Thank you.
I think that this is a really good lesson. If you were trying to summarize the things that we would tell our clients about this decision, what would you say?
I would say don't put hands on anybody, and don't put poisonous or non-poisonous pythons and rats, but also don't put poisonous things in people's
rabbit, dogs,
homes.
anything, any kind of animal.
Just don't do it.
One last thing about this here is that who is the perpetrator in this case? Is the wife, and I'm seeing a lot more cases come my way, and I'm representing a lot of women who have been accused of domestic violence, and so men are calling as well, and they're pulling all the right cards as well and stuff like this. So this applies as a non-gender thing, and if you think it's okay to slap somebody in the face or to do something outrageous because that's what you're expected to do during a divorce, it's not. Okay, it's kind of funny about the rats and the python, I guess, kind of funny. But look what happened to this woman. She was probably entitled to a whole bunch of spousal support. I mean, her husband's a doctor, and we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars for a long-term marriage.
21 years.
Yeah, she did herself a real injustice, by, acting emotionally like that. So
yeah, it's really hard not to, but you can't let your emotions get to you.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now that I know that you're the spousal support lady, we're going to have you back on. I think next time we're going to talk about marriage in Paraguay, but we'll leave that for later.
It's a fun one.
Thank you very much for joining us on Exhibit A, and we will see you next time.